If you could erase all the pain from your life, would you? It sounds tempting, doesn't it? After all, who wouldn't want to get rid of difficult memories and wounds that refuse to heal? But Nietzsche, one of the most intriguing thinkers in history, believed that human greatness can only be achieved by confronting head-on the moments we most wish to avoid. Now, take a moment to think about the hardest pain you've ever faced. Maybe it was an irreparable loss, a failure that left scars, or even a period of uncertainty that felt never-ending. How did it change you? Would you be the same person without those moments? This is Nietzsche's central challenge. He believed it is precisely through suffering that we discover our strength, grow, and perhaps become something we once thought impossible. In this video, we'll explore what the German philosopher had to say about the relationship between pain and growth. We'll dive into ideas that challenge the way we see difficulties and uncover how embracing suffering could be the key to a kind of greatness only he could envision. Because perhaps what we try so hard to avoid is exactly what we need to truly flourish. Imagine a life marked by constant pain. Not just emotional pain, but physical, excruciating, and relentless. Friedrich Nietzsche lived exactly that. From a young age, he battled fragile health that seemed to never give him a break. Chronic vision problems, debilitating migraines, and an almost forced solitude shaped much of his existence. Rejected in relationships and isolated intellectually, he never found solace in social conventions. These experiences didn't just shape a philosopher who thought about pain. They created one who lived it in its rawest form. For Nietzsche, suffering wasn't an evil to be avoided, but a transformative force. Instead of running from it or seeking immediate relief, he believed pain had the power to sculpt the human spirit, like the wind that shapes mountains or the storm that tears away old leaves to make way for new growth. Think of suffering as a storm. While it may seem devastating, it's also what fertilizes the soil for new seeds to sprout. Without that destructive force, the land would never be renewed. In his work, Nietzsche states, "What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end. To him, we are meant to cross over, to transform into something greater, and suffering is the bridge that pushes us to leave behind who we are and get closer to who we can become." Rather than seeing pain as an obstacle, he viewed it as the necessary path to reach a higher ideal. Nature also offers a perfect example of his philosophy. Trees growing in windy forests face constant resistance, but it's precisely that struggle that strengthens their roots and makes their trunks more robust. Without the force of the wind, they would be fragile, incapable of withstanding the inevitable storms. For Nietzsche, suffering works the same way. It's a force that challenges us, making us more resilient and better prepared for the world. It is at the limits of our strength that we truly confront who we are. For Nietzsche, suffering plays an essential role. It forces us to look inward, to recognize our vulnerabilities, and often to discover a strength we never knew we had. In a world where we are constantly seeking comfort, Nietzsche reminds us that it is discomfort that pushes us to evolve. Think of suffering as the pressure that transforms coal into a diamond. It's a long, arduous, and often invisible process. But without that pressure, coal remains just coal. Suffering forces us out of autopilot, making us question, seek new paths, and see possibilities where we once saw only walls. Now, imagine someone who loses their job. They're caught off guard because they never thought it could happen to them. At first, panic sets in. There are bills to pay, children depending on them, and rent coming due in just a few days. Every call from the bank is a cruel reminder of their situation. Sitting at the dinner table, they see the worried faces of their family, all waiting for answers they don't yet have. In the first few days, the feeling of helplessness is overwhelming. Fear seems to paralyze them, but as time goes on, they realize that standing still isn't an option. They update their resume and start sending it out to companies. But responses are slow. The savings run out, and they start making cuts. First canceling leisure activities, then facing harder decisions, like postponing their children's private school. In this scenario, something begins to change, not magically, but as a result of sleepless nights and reflections forced by pain. They remember something they used to enjoy, perhaps sewing, cooking, or fixing things, and begin to explore it as an alternative. A relative suggests selling something on social media, and with no other option, they try it slowly. This new activity, which once seemed like a mere improvisation, starts to bring in some income. It's important to clarify, however, that this isn't about romanticizing suffering. There's nothing inherently good about pain, and Nietzsche doesn't suggest we should seek it out or glorify it. The central point is how we respond when suffering becomes unavoidable, when there's no other way forward. The choice we have is to let it defeat us, or to find a way to turn it into learning or growth. This philosophy isn't an invitation to masochism, but a proposal for resilience in the face of the inevitable. Nietzsche also invites us to reflect on the story of Prometheus from Greek mythology. Prometheus defied the gods to bring fire to humanity, a symbol of knowledge and progress. For this act, he was condemned to eternal torture, with his flesh being devoured daily, yet his sacrifice gave rise to something far greater than himself: the advancement of human civilization. The myth reminds us that pain, when tied to a purpose, can create something extraordinary. Thus, suffering is not just a burden, it is a catalyst. It opens doors we might never have crossed otherwise. While difficult to accept in the moment, pain carries within it the potential to transform, to refine, and to make us shine. Nietzsche challenges us with an idea that may seem radical at first: Amor Fati, or love of fate. But what does this really mean? For him, it's not just about accepting what happens. It's about embracing everything, the good and the bad, the pleasure and the pain, as essential parts of life. It's looking at events, even the most challenging ones, and saying, yes, I choose this. I wouldn't change a thing. This idea is not an invitation to passivity or resignation. Quite the opposite. It's an active stance that challenges us to abandon the constant quest to control life. Think of it as a sailor learning to navigate not against the wind, but with it, adjusting their sails. Nietzsche believed that by ceasing to resist adversity, we gain a greater freedom, the ability to find meaning in everything that happens to us, even in pain. A clear example of this philosophy can be found in the life of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. Even while enduring the horrors of a concentration camp, Frankl found meaning in suffering. He believed that, even in the worst circumstances, humans have the freedom to choose their attitude. It wasn't the tragedy itself that he romanticized, but the meaning he assigned to it. His experience led him to create logotherapy, a therapeutic approach focused on finding purpose. Even amid suffering, Nietzsche invites us to reflect. What if we began to see every difficulty as a gift, an opportunity to shape who we are? This doesn't mean ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine, but recognizing the potential for growth embedded in even the hardest moments. Amor Fati isn't about forcing optimism, but about accepting life in its entirety. An artistic example that reflects this idea is Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night. Created during a period of intense mental suffering, the painting is both melancholic and hopeful. Van Gogh didn't run from his pain. He transformed it into something that resonates with millions of people to this day. His art teaches us that there is beauty even in the darkest moments. Amor Fati is, therefore, an invitation to courage. It's about letting go of the desire to change the past and instead finding meaning in it. Nietzsche challenges us to live fully, without regrets or rejections of what life throws our way. After all, would we be who we are today without the struggles we've faced? For Nietzsche, suffering is not just an inevitable condition of life, but a necessary step toward achieving something greater. He believed that the true aim of humanity isn't to avoid pain, but to overcome it, transforming it into fuel for greatness. This idea lies at the heart of his concept of the Übermensch, or overman, someone who transcends their limits, creates their own values, and turns suffering into creative strength. Think of the process of forging a sword. The strongest blade isn't made of pure metal alone. It must be heated to extreme temperatures, hammered repeatedly, and cooled under precise conditions. It's this brutal process that gives the metal its resilience and ability to withstand battle. For Nietzsche, we are like these swords. It's the heat of suffering and the weight of challenges that make us stronger and more prepared for life. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison under inhumane conditions, yet he refused to let suffering define him. Instead, he used his experience to become a symbol of forgiveness, leadership, and rebuilding. Upon his release, he did not seek revenge, but led a fractured nation toward reconciliation. His story is a living example of what Nietzsche proposed, transforming pain into something that transcends human limitations. This idea also prompts a critical question. Are we so intent on avoiding suffering that we are missing the potential to become something greater? We live in an age where endless distractions and comforts are at our disposal to evade any discomfort. But in fleeing from suffering, are we also fleeing from opportunities for growth? Nietzsche believed that by facing pain head-on, we not only develop resilience, but also unlock the ability to create something uniquely ours, something that could only emerge through such confrontation. The Übermensch is not someone who denies pain, but someone who uses it as a lever. This individual, rather than being consumed by adversity, transforms it into creative strength to shape their own life and the world around them. Nietzsche reminds us that suffering is not the end. It is only the beginning of a journey that can lead to greatness. In modern society, suffering is almost seen as a mistake, something to be avoided at all costs. We live in an era where distractions are always within reach, promising to fill any void or push away discomfort. But Nietzsche would warn us, by avoiding pain, are we also losing the chance to grow? Consider how today's culture encourages us to anesthetize suffering. If we feel sad, we turn to social media, binge-watch shows, make impulsive purchases, or, in more severe cases, self-medicate. It's no coincidence that we live in a black label society, where medications are seen as a quick fix for any emotional discomfort. Of course, medications can be essential and life-saving in many cases, but the problem arises when they're used indiscriminately, without addressing the root of the pain. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a deep wound. It may provide temporary relief, but doesn't solve the underlying issue. It's as though any moment of sadness, boredom, or introspection is treated as an error that needs immediate correction, yet Nietzsche would argue that pain is an inherent part of life. And more than that, it's necessary for growth. By trying to silence it, we may also be silencing our potential for transformation. A clear example of this is the overuse of apps and social media. When we're distressed, we turn to these platforms to escape discomfort. But instead of helping, they often leave us even more disconnected from ourselves, creating a cycle of dissatisfaction. And it doesn't stop there. The relentless pursuit of emotional anesthesia, whether through distractions or medications, can lead us to a state where we avoid suffering so thoroughly that we end up avoiding life in its fullness. Nietzsche believed that avoiding pain was akin to avoiding existence itself. He didn't suggest that we should seek pain, but he argued that we should at least accept its inevitable presence as an invitation to introspection and growth. Modern society, however, is so focused on eliminating discomfort that it paradoxically makes us more fragile. After all, the more we avoid pain, the less capable we become of facing it. Perhaps it's time to rethink how we deal with suffering. Instead of viewing it as an enemy to be fought with distractions or medications, we could see it as a teacher challenging us to grow. This doesn't mean denying the importance of seeking help, but recognizing that true strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from learning to face it consciously. In the end, what truly strengthens us isn't the absence of suffering, but what we do with it. Suffering, often seen as something to avoid, has inspired some of the greatest works of art and cultural moments in history. It seems to be a quiet force, transforming personal pain into something universal that deeply resonates with those who experience these creations. Nietzsche believed that pain, when confronted and worked through, could become a source of beauty and meaning, and art offers countless examples of this transformation. Beethoven is a powerful example. Imagine losing the ability to hear, the most essential sense for a composer, during a time when despair could have overwhelmed him. He created some of his most brilliant works, like the Ninth Symphony, a celebration of brotherhood and human triumph. Beethoven didn't ignore his suffering. He infused it into his music, transforming his pain into something that continues to inspire millions. In film, stories like Cast Away explore this same dynamic. Tom Hanks's character, stranded on a deserted island, undergoes a journey of extreme suffering and self-discovery. He loses almost everything but gains something money can't buy: a deeper connection with himself and the meaning of life. As with Beethoven's music, isolation and pain create a new perspective, transforming the character from within. Another iconic example comes from literature. The Diary of Anne Frank is more than a record of the horrors of war. It's a testament to how pain can be transformed into hope. Written during the years Anne and her family lived in hiding, the diary reveals the thoughts of a young girl who, even in the face of extreme suffering, found beauty in small things and believed in human goodness. Her work transcended her personal tragedy, becoming a universal symbol of resilience and faith in humanity. Nietzsche invites us to reflect: would art, in all its richness and depth, be the same without pain? He believed that art is chaos transformed into harmony, pain converted into beauty. This is why we're often most moved by a painting, a piece of music, or a film born out of suffering. They remind us that we're not alone in our struggles. There is something universal about the experience of pain. Suffering, in art and culture, teaches us that there are ways to transform our pain into something meaningful. It reminds us that difficult experiences, when processed and expressed, can build bridges between individuals and generations. Instead of being an end, pain can be the beginning of something that transcends the artist. Touching and inspiring the world, embracing suffering is not synonymous with passively accepting it. It is an active process that requires courage and practices that help us deal with difficult emotions without repressing them. Nietzsche saw this attitude as a way to connect with life in its entirety, recognizing that pain is part of what makes us human. But how can we do this in practice? An effective approach is mindfulness. This practice teaches us to observe our thoughts and emotions without judging them. Imagine you are feeling anxious after a difficult situation. Instead of trying to escape this feeling, you pause, breathe deeply, and simply observe what is happening in your body and mind. It seems simple, but this small act of presence can completely change how we deal with pain, allowing it to run its course without consuming us. Another symbolic and powerful strategy is writing a letter to your future self. Take a moment of suffering you are experiencing now and write about it for a future version of yourself. Describe what you are feeling, the challenges you are facing, and what you hope to learn from it. For example, today, everything feels heavy. The uncertainty is making me anxious, and I am afraid I won't be able to handle it. But I am trying, day by day, to take small steps to get through this. I know that, somehow, I will make it. When you, in the future, read this letter, I hope it reminds you of everything we went through and how we were able to overcome it. If you are in a better place now, know this: you are stronger than you thought you were at that moment. This exercise not only helps organize emotions, but also reinforces that. In moments of suffering, we often underestimate our ability to overcome challenges. Revisiting this letter in the future is concrete proof that what once seemed unbearable has been overcome, showing that there is always strength to keep moving forward, even when we think there is none. These practices do not eliminate pain, but help integrate it in a healthier way. It is like adjusting the sails of a boat during a storm. You cannot control the wind, but you can decide how to navigate. Facing suffering with these tools gives us the chance to develop resilience, emotional clarity, and a deeper sense of self-compassion. Nietzsche challenged us not to run from life, but to face it honestly, even in its most difficult moments. Incorporating practices like mindfulness or reflective exercises can help us walk this path, transforming suffering into something that, while not desired, brings us closer to a more conscious existence. Each scar tells a story, and each story brings us closer to who we truly are. It is in struggle that we discover our resilience, and in adversity that we find our purpose. What was the hardest moment of your life? And what did you learn from it? And what are you facing right now that feels endless, that feels bigger than you? Maybe you could leave a comment here about it, and I truly hope that one day you come back to reread what you wrote. I hope that, when that happens, you'll realize how much things have changed, and see clearly the strength you found as you made it through this moment. Because as Nietzsche reminds us, what is noble in man is not what he avoids, but what he faces. And in the midst of chaos is where the dancing stars are born.